Welcome to Debunking NLP, the live stream where we will debunk bad NLP or even fake NLP. We will go into detail what is either wrong with NLP or not, again, what is wrong with the NLP trainer that is explaining what NLP is supposedly to be. Or I'll explain why it has nothing to do with NLP, even though it's sold as NLP. So we're going to look tonight at the work of John Grinder. He is always called the co-creator of NLP because in the 70s he did work with Richard Bandler. Unfortunately, none of his work survived today. He is still active, he is still alive, but none of what he has been doing has been actually nowadays being used in modern days NLP. So I never call him the co-creator of NLP because what he did was done in the 70s and he hasn't done anything since then. So what we're going to do is look at one of his training programs, and it is important to make clear before we start that within NLP there are two modes of communications. You can either communicate to influence people or you can communicate to clarify stuff. And the idea is that if you communicate to influence people, you use the Milton model, and basically anything goes. Anything that you can say will be correct according to the Milton model, even though there are more beautiful or better or more effective language patterns. But in reality, there is very limited, very little that limits you in what you do. There are a few limits because what is needed is that you actually, do need to do on purpose and consciously. You don't use the Milton model consciously, you use it unconsciously because there's language patterns, and language patterns are, they'll have a kind of stream from your conscious mind to the outside world. So you talk and write quite unconsciously. But when you wanted to use it to influence people, you actually have to make a conscious decision to do so, because often what happens with bad NLP trainers is that they think they are clarifying stuff, but they're so bad at clarifying stuff that it, violates the rules for clarifying stuff. And then if you call them out on it, you say, hey, that is very bad what you're using as a language or as a clarification. Then they say, oh, but then it wasn't clarification, it was influencing. But that is something that is basically very bad or wrong to do. You cannot justify your bad behavior in hindsight by appealing to the Milton model. So the other model is the meta model, and the meta model is very strict. There's 12 rules. If you follow those rules, then you your communication is very clear and you're clarifying stuff. If you violate those rules, then your communication is unclear and not clarifying at all. Now, these rules are very strict, so it is impossible not to violate them. So it's more important to not violate them in a major and relevant way. Most violations are minor and irrelevant, but we'll see that in the case of John Grinder, it actually is quite, major and relevant. So let's get him into the show. Well, that doesn't look good. That was what I was looking for, but I also want to see a bit more. The old problem is coming up again, but no worries, we'll edit it afterwards. If you have, by the way, if you have any questions, please let me know. If you disagree with me, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll start, and I will just run the video and comment it bit by bit. So here we go.
Number one, get yourself a genius.
So this is John Grinder's model that John Grinder uses for modeling, but as far as I've searched, I did not find any other model. So, well, it is a bit of a trick for NLP trainers to claim that it's just a way of doing stuff without actually explaining what all the other variants are. But he is going to explain what modeling is. And modeling with NLP is most of the time fake. There is no modeling whatsoever. What they are really talking about is strategy elicitation. But in the 70s, they did model stuff, and John Grinder was a big part of it for the fact that he did it together with Richard Bandler, the real creator of NLP. So now he's going to explain how this modeling works. And basically what the claim is in the 70s is that they found a way to map the human behaviors in such a way that you can use them themselves. You could copy it from someone who was very good at it. And you could even then train other people to use those strategies. And here he is using the word genius, and that's already, basically the wrong way to go about it. So if you clarify it, it is much better to say that you look for people who are good at something rather than a genius. A genius is just way too, high up there. In reality, they hardly ever talk to real geniuses. But we'll see that it gets worse. So step one is find a genius. But again, in reality, we're just looking at who is someone who is good at something.
Number two, unconsciously assimilate patterning. 3.
So here, the step 2 is unconsciously assimilate patterning. And this is complete nonsense. This is just blah, blah, blah away. And if you say something that you have to do something unconsciously, then you're immediately you cannot do it. If I say to you, unconsciously learn what I'm now saying, then either you do it consciously or you basically, it's just a luck of the draw. So it's just total absurd to say something like unconsciously assimilate patterning. What it basically means is that don't ask me how to do it. You have to do it unconsciously, and because it is unconscious, nobody has any clue how to do it whatsoever. So this is just bullshit. This is just trying to sound very impressive by using the Milton model, but in reality, it's not saying anything. If you go to the second word, assimilate is what we call an unspecified verb. It is really sounds really nice, but again, if you don't know what the exact process is, if you don't have a specification for the process, then it is a empty word. And given that he says it is an unconscious assimilation, yes, that means that even if you ask him for the process, then he's saying, "Oh, we don't know. That is unconscious. We have no idea." So this is all fake. This is just really bad NLP. And then in the final end, the patterning. Yeah, the patterning is also just a very fancy word for looking at steps. So we already saw that the genius in step 1 is not really a genius. And in step 2, what he really means to say is you have to act like the genius. And so you find someone who's good at something. And then according to John Grinder, again, this is not NLP, this is just bad NLP, then you act like him. And in his courses, or you act like the genius, you don't act like John Grinder, although he thinks he's a genius. And so in his courses, then he will come up with a magician or a dancer, and then you have to learn what the magician does or the dancer by basically imitating them, by mimicking them. And well, even though that has nothing to do with modeling, it's just by imitating of mimicking someone. In the case of a dancer and in case of a magician, those are very bodily activities. Then maybe there is something that you can learn that way. But if I'm a philosopher by trade, if you're going to imitate the philosopher is just going to sit there and go, And if you're going to imitate that behavior, no philosophy is going to go into your mind whatsoever. I'm a DJ. If you want to learn how to play music and DJ in the techno scene, If you want to beat match and use harmonics to mix, again, you can look at my external behaviors, but it won't tell you anything about how to beat mix. So you can already see that this is way simpler than he presents it. By using the Milton model, he presents it in a way more, nice way. But yeah, that doesn't mean anything. And the real trouble with this is that he is basically using the Milton model to hypnotize people into believing that this is good NLP, where in reality it is bad NLP. But he is using it in a training program. And there are many opportunities in a training program to use the Milton model to influence participants to better embed the positive strategies and install good ideas in their deep inside their mind. So there's plenty of room for that, but just not now. Now it's time for clarification. And if John Grinder thinks this is clarifying, we can smack him around with the meta model and show that this is not clarification at all. This is obfuscation. So the exact opposite. And so this is all really pointless, and we don't, it is just a really bad NLP.
Be practiced in parallel context. And be.
And so the step 3, practice. Well, I am a big fan of practice. I didn't think of it myself, but I lost who said it first. But there's a very nice way of saying it. For students, there are masters, but for masters, there's only practice. And so I'm a big fan of practice. Nothing wrong with practice. But the problem here is that he adds in a parallel context. And this is, again, just to make it sound really intelligent, really wise, really deep. So you go, oh, we have to do it in a parallel context. Oh, what a good addition. But in reality, it really doesn't mean anything. So if you find someone, I'm from the Netherlands, so we always have examples with bikes. So if you have a flat tire in your bike and you want to find someone who's really good at repairing flat tires, and you're going to look how he or she does it, and then you're going to copy it, you're going to practice it yourself, and then of course you do it in the context of a flat tire. It would be so absurdly stupid to try to do the same thing, but then while you're baking pancakes. There is nothing in baking pancakes that even remotely is similar to repairing a flat tire. So the addition of in a parallel context adds nothing. It is a completely, empty phrase that is just added to make it sound more interesting, to make you believe it more that this is really, really something that you need to learn. Well, in reality, so far what we have is find someone who is good at something, look at what he or she is doing, and repeat what he or she is doing, which is totally basic.
In fact, these two right here are, this is the course.
And so the course, according to John Grinder, the course where you pay a lot of money for, is basically the unconscious assimilation of patterning, which is basically bullshit. It is completely empty, but what it really boils down to is to act like someone else. And 3 is that once you've acted like someone else, that you're actually going to practice like acting like someone else, which is basically the same. So basically what he is saying is the whole course that you paid a lot of money for is imitating other people. And that's it.
This is the only thing we're really shooting at. To have the ability to enter a know-nothing state, which just allows you to unconsciously assimilate.
And here there's another famous phrase by John Grinder, the know-nothing state. And again, it's a stupid phrase. If you know nothing, then you don't know even how to read English or understand English, and then the whole course is pointless. So if one of the participants would actually get into the know-nothing state, then he would be completely lost, because then he would know nothing, and he would no longer be able to breathe, he would no longer be able to speak, he would no longer be able to listen. So he couldn't even be saved. If someone actually did it like that, then he could not even be saved, because as soon as you say stop doing it and remember that you could go back to English, then in the know-nothing state, he would know nothing, and he would not know even what you were saying. So the know-nothing state is bullshit. It is just another nice-sounding phrase that is empty, that doesn't add anything.
Play patterning, and then practicing it in context through imitation until.
And here you hear he say, practice it through imitation, and that's what it all boils down to, imitation.
Your behavior is indistinguishable as too strong a condition. Your behavior.
And here he says, yeah, you have to imitate the person who is good at something, and you imitate it till, and it is too strong to say that it is indistinguishable. So now we say, of course, we can't get at the level of real geniuses where you become indistinguishable with the person who's good at something. But we'll probably hear that he's later going to backtrack on it. And then, of course, he's perfectly lying. He's promising you the world, but he's not delivering at all.
It's similar enough to the model's behavior that people have.
And so now he says it doesn't have to be indistinguishable, but it has to be similar enough to the other person's behavior. Well, that sounds nice, but now you have to pay attention what comes now.
Difficulty making distinctions where the differences are, if anywhere.
And now he says where people have a difficulty to make the distinction where they are, if they are there at all. And so what he basically did is again say you have to be indistinguishable. So he first says, okay, this being indistinguishable is too high a condition or a requirement. So you only have to be similar enough, but you have to be similar enough that there's no difference to be found. If there are differences are at all, and preferably there are no differences, basically it becomes indistinguishable. This is very nice language patterning. Eh? There's beautiful hypnosis, great Milton patterning, Milton language patterns. We love it. He's good at it. But he's doing it at the wrong moment in a course. He's doing it while he should be clarifying, and it is not clarification at all. If you say, okay, so you have to imitate someone, and you have to imitate him over and over and over and over again until you're indistinguishable from the original person. And that is, of course, if you boil it down to that, then, of course, you immediately hear that it's an impossible task. And then, of course, the value of this becomes zero. It becomes worthless because he is basically giving you a recipe to fail because you cannot do what he is asking you to do.
And the responses that your behavior, imitative behavior of the model, elicit from the world are more or less the responses that the model gets when he or she works with a group of people or whatever the application happens to be.
And again, he says, it's so long-winding and tries to sound so interesting that basically he wants that not only have to behave like someone, again, he wants you to imitate someone, but when you imitate someone, they also should react the same way that they do to them as they do to you. And here there's, of course, a big problem because if your genius is a real genius, then people will react different to them, basically, due to the fact that they are famous. Say you want to become the King of England and you practice over and over to imitate King Charles nowadays, King Charles. So you practice over and over and over again to be Prince Charles. Or sorry, King Charles, my bad. And say that you in your behaviors, you imitate him perfectly. It is indistinguishable in behavior. Then nobody will actually react to you in the same way as they react to King Charles, for the very simple reason that you're not the King of England. And that hence, given that you're not the King of England, people will react differently to you than to the actual King Charles. Which means, again, that the second demand that he makes is also an impossible demand, again, making this whole model worthless.
At that point, that magical point where you can replicate by imitation or partial imitation the behavior.
And here you can see that if you replicate through imitation, which is basically, again, fancy words for just saying, okay, you have to copy whatever the other person is doing. That's all he's saying, but he's just making it sound much more interesting, which is bad because he should be clarifying stuff. But he is already backtracking and saying, okay, yeah, more or less imitating, because he also feels that that imitating is, as an unspecified verb, is too simple. You can, if it's just imitation, then people might not want to pay him thousands of dollars to follow his course or to participate in his course. So he's trying to avoid that imitation part, because that is just a failure. And you can see that he is struggling with it.
Of the model itself, then something important happens in the model. Step 4 is a conscious, unconscious dance in order to find a way of coding what you already are able to do.
Here you have a conscious and unconscious dance in be able to codify what you're already able to do, which again is complete bullshit. If you listen to it, what is the fuck is he saying? He's just saying that you have to do something consciously or unconsciously. Well, again, as soon as he introduces unconsciously, then the process becomes completely, I say it in English, fake. It's another word, but I can't find it at the right moment. It becomes completely opaque. That was what I was looking for. Because as soon as you ask him, okay, but how is it done exactly? What steps do I have to take precisely to do this? And then he can say, yeah, well, but we don't know because it is unconsciously. And then the unspecified verb is this time is not assimilate, but is dance. So he wants you to model by dancing. Of course, he is going to introduce a real dancer. So there's a nice loop and a nice link and a nice, I call them ambiguity. But again, this is all very good Milton model practice, but we're not here to be hypnotized. We're here to actually be clarified something, to have a clarification of his model, and it is completely wrong and empty, and it is worthless.
And finally, 5 is a phase of testing. Human behavior.
So testing, I'm a big fan of testing. So we are really like testing. So that is the first good thing. Our practice we also love, but he was just making it sound a bit more, I say, hard to swallow. So we like practice and we like testing, but the testing part is, let's hide this for a moment, is also part of the TOTI model. So let me just quickly see if I can come up with a nice picture of the TOTI model. Then I can. And we'll see that actually what he has just explained is just something that was already figured out in the 1960s, because there was a book called Plants and the Structure of Behavior by Miller. And Miller actually was the one who developed the TOTI model. And the TOTI model is very simple to understand. Let me go back to it. So you have the TOTI model. And in the TOTI model, you have test, operate, test, exit. So the operation is basically what you do. So in this case, you look for someone who is good at something, and then you're going to do the same. You're going to imitate him. That is the operation. And then you have to practice. But then the test comes and see, okay, can you actually do it? And if you can't do it, you go back to the operation. If you can do it, then there's an exit. So the TOTI model stands for test, operate, test, exit. The first test is missing in this case with John Grinder's story. But if you listen carefully, then you can see that it's 5 steps. Find a genius is basically find someone who's good at something. His second step is imitate this person. His third step is practice, which is basically the same because we still want to be imitating. His fourth step is dance around and codify it, which is basically pray to God to somehow have these learnings stored in your brain. Or basically, more scientifically, it's not praying to God, but it is waiting till your brain is actually encoded these learnings. And then 5, it's testing whether what you've done did any good. So this is basically the TOTI model, and but then explained in a completely stupid way by just using way too much Milton model patterns, and rather than using the meta model to clarify stuff. And the question is, why would he do this? Why would he do this? Well, the reason is very simple. He does this because he knows that if he's just going to explain the TOTI model, that he then doesn't have much to say, and he doesn't have his own brand of NLP that he can sell. So let's continue.
Especially skill sets like the ones that you'll be exposed to, and opportunity for you to practice these know-nothing states. They are complex enough behaviors such as these that there must be thousands of ways of successfully coding them. There is no approved solution.
Again, he is saying in thousands of ways because he doesn't want you to actually ask him, but can you tell us precisely how this coding is working? Because he doesn't know, but he should know, because in reality, in good NLP, this is just strategy elicitation. We use the TOTI model for that. We just go into the NLP strategy elicitation method, where you use submodalities to discover how stuff is coded. It is really easy, but as soon as he says that, then his special magic sauce that he is selling turns out to be very bland and doesn't work. So then he loses his unique selling point.
There's no solution at all. There are 1,000 solutions.
Of course, here someone in the audience should ask, "Hey, John Grinder, if there are thousands of solutions, can you just demonstrate just one so that we can actually see how this stuff works?"
And the only way you'll know whether you have successfully in stage 4 explicated the patterns which are the tacit knowledge base of the behavior you've already demonstrated you can do, namely imitation, successful, of the model. The only way you know if that coding is a successful transfer mechanism to other people who want to be able to do this is by giving it to other people and observing whether, given the code only, but not the original model, in a reasonably short, efficient period of time, they come to behavior which resembles in its most essential elements the behavior of the model that you used and transmitted to them through this code.
So, very long and winding story. What he basically says is that the testing is into whether you have coded it correctly, is to see whether other people who don't know the person who's good at something, the genius, can actually do what you learned from the genius. Of course, this is just the way learning works. So a teacher, before he becomes a teacher, goes to the school for teachers, and there he learns how to teach, and then he is put into high school, and then he teaches. And if you then learn what he learned on in the school for teachers, then actually he has done this. So this is not special at all. This is so simplistic, and it is so dumb as soon as you are able to, by using the meta model, to boil it down to what it all comes down to.
This section down here is complex in the extreme.
So here he says, this section here is complex in the extreme, meaning don't ask me how it works. I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. I can't explain it to you. I can just blah, blah around it. I can just obfuscate stuff, but I'm not going to teach you. Of course, then he's just teaching half. So not even half. He's going to teach this course only 2/5 of his model of modeling. He's not going to explain how to find geniuses. And he's not going to tell you how to codify the stuff and how to test it. So yeah, that is pretty worthless.
And it's an interesting interplay between, as I said, a dance between conscious and unconscious behavior. And we're not doing anything with that here.
And we're not doing anything with it here. So there you have it. You don't get anything, which is the final, the truthful thing that he is saying. So, of course, we would like to see it if it's possible to do it differently. Of course, that is possible. Let me just look up the one that I'm looking at. And we're going to look at Richard Bandler to see what Richard is saying. Let's put it back in the stream. Okay, here we go.
Oh, probably the most misunderstood term of all of them.
So he's talking about modeling. The question is of Richard Bandler explains what is modeling in NLP. And he says the most misunderstood term of all. Well, we've seen that John Grinder supposedly, I can't, it's not my native language, English. And so here it says Dr. Richard Bandler, co-creator of NLP. And of course, John Grinder is the other co-creator, but unfortunately, he misunderstands modeling by a long stretch.
A lot of people have modeling confused with strategy elicitation.
That's the same point that I was making in the video, that what John Grinder is talking about is just strategy elicitation and not modeling at all.
And they're not even close. And some people think imitating is modeling.
Well, here, Richard Bandler, without naming John Grinder, is putting John Grinder down as just an imitator. And yeah, that has nothing to do with modeling.
Which it is a form of modeling, but it's not the same thing. When mathematicians talk about modeling, we're talking about building a calculus.
And here, Richard is also using Milton patterns that are not that clarifying at all. So the trick here is that he actually knows what a model is within NLP. I did a different video. You can look it up on my YouTube channel, and that explains why John Grinder does not know what a model is within NLP. So we are talking here about the modeling activity, the modeling behavior. But when you model as a behavior, you create something, and what you create is actually called a model. It's also called a model. But yes, John Grinder has no idea what a model is. He doesn't know what comes out of a modeling process. And Richard does, because he knows that what you actually do is you build a mathematical model. And so what he said here, you create a calculus. What he actually means is that you create a mathematical model where you can basically transform inputs into outputs. NLP is based on cybernetics. It is pretty much based on the book Plans and Structure of Behavior of Miller from 1960 that I talked about earlier. And that is the cybernetic basis of NLP through the TOTI model. And cybernetics works through transformation tables. Let me see if I can quickly come up with a example of a cybernetic transformation table. Of course, that is harder to find. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. Well, it shows it on one page, but not on the other. Let's see if I can get it on the stream. All right. So there you have it. I hope you can see it. It's quite small, but basically what it says is that here's a machine. Cybernetics is basically for both machine, for man and machine. No, I can't make it bigger than this. But you have different states. And so basically an A turns into an E, a B turns into an D, the E turns into B. These are basically transformations. This is all with letters, but you can make it also into mathematics. And that is basically a transformation table. You can see it is very mathematical, but that's actually what Richard is meaning, because what you do within NLP is you take the submodalities of the current state, of the current situation, and you transform them in different submodalities in the desired situation. And that process is actually what the model is within NLP.
So that you can identify what is and compute what else might be there. When we modeled psychotherapists, we built the four-tuple, which was a calculus by which we could describe their behavior.
Oh, my bad. I should put Richard first back into the stream.
So that you can identify what is and compute what else might be there. When we modeled psychotherapists, we built the four-tuple, which was a calculus by which we could describe their behavior. This allowed.
And so here he's saying basically that the four-tuple is actually what I said by submodalities. Submodalities are, I say, properties of modalities, which are the five senses, but because taste and smell is basically the same sense. Then you have four senses, and these four senses are called the four-tuple. Again, it is unnecessarily complicated. It doesn't clarify that all that much. But what he is saying is that basically you use these modalities, these submodalities, to create these transformation tables where you transform from the current unwanted situation into the future desired behaviors and situation.
Allowed us to figure out things they might have done had they been alone. We modeled their intuitions in much the same way that Noam Chomsky modeled language.
And here Richard is saying something that is highly unlikely. Chomsky did something completely different. NLP always refers to Chomsky, but they actually have much more to do with the more traditional philosophy of language of the 50s and the 60s than the work of Chomsky.
That particular form of modeling gave us what came to be called strategy elicitation.
And again, this is also a good point, is that he's making clear that they used a different way of modeling in the 70s, because in the 70s there was no NLP. They used modeling to get to NLP, to develop NLP, but they didn't use NLP to create NLP, because again, that is a logical impossibility.
And most of neuro-linguistic programming is a form of modeling by which we take successful intuitive behaviors, things that people do unconsciously that work, and we describe it in a way where other people can learn it, and also where we could begin to compute what other successful behaviors they might have done had they lived 100 years or 200 years.
And again, the second part is more about design human engineering than about neuro-linguistic programming. It takes another stream to explain that difference. There's actually a video of me explaining the difference. But the more important thing is that he says, yeah, that NLP is a way to describe human behaviors by using modalities and submodalities. And that's what it all boils down to. It can be explained even much better than Richard explains it, but it will be definitely be correct, even though he's using too many Milton language patterns himself as well. But at least there is a deeper, if you boil it down, you actually get something that works. Whereas with John Grinder, you only get, how you say, the stuff that doesn't work. So far, this stream, thank you very much for participating. See you next time. Bye-bye.